All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about Neil Gaiman's American Gods.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. You sent over this academic paper, and it really digs into some pretty intense themes
Mm,
like mortality
yeah.
and sacrifice.
Yeah, I thought it would be a good one for the show. I mean, it's such a rich text, right? And, one thing that really stood out to me was how Gaiman, he doesn't just like touch on those big questions like the meaning of life and all
Yeah,
that.
right.
He really digs in and uses them to kind of examine, the relationship between gods and humans.
Okay, so it's not just like gods and monsters and all that kind of stuff, but what it means to be human in this whole crazy world.
Exactly. And the paper, it argues that Gaiman actually frames mortality as like the defining characteristic of humanity. Like
Yeah.
we're bound by time and, by the fact that our lives are going to end. But the paper suggests that this isn't a bad thing.
Oh,
It gives meaning to our experiences.
so like our limited time makes everything matter more.
Right. Exactly.
I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. How does this play out in this story?
Well, so you have Shadow Moon, right? The main character, the protagonist.
Right.
And he's grappling with the loss of his wife, Laura,
Oh, yeah.
and then her return, but as this kind of undead being,
Oh, wow.
really throws a wrench in his whole understanding of life and death.
Yeah, that's not just grieving. That's like a whole existential crisis.
Exactly.
Does the paper talk about how this ties into the bigger themes at all?
Yeah, definitely. It highlights how Laura's, this undead state
Right.
forces Shadow and us as readers too to kind of confront the boundaries of existence. Like, what does it mean to truly live or to die? Gaiman he blurs the lines,
Right.
makes us question our own assumptions about all of it.
Whoa. So he's using these like fantastical elements to get us thinking about real life stuff.
Yeah.
That's really cool. But the gods in this story, they're not exactly immortal either, right?
No, you're exactly right. This is where it gets really interesting. The paper points out that even the gods, they face a kind of mortality in American Gods.
Okay.
It's not about like physical death, but about fading from relevance.
Oh, okay.
When people stop believing in them, they kind of lose their power.
Yeah. So it's like their life force is directly tied to our belief.
Exactly.
That's a pretty wild concept.
Right.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like the old gods, like they're fading because we've shifted our belief to new things.
Yeah.
Like technology and media and,
Yeah.
it's almost like Gaiman is suggesting that our collective attention is what gives these beings life.
So the gods need us in a way.
Yes.
That totally flips the power dynamic on its head.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how like the ancient Greeks, they believed that their gods needed sacrifices to stay strong. Speaking of sacrifice, the paper dives into that too, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, sacrifice it's another key theme that the paper explores. It argues that sacrifice acts as a kind of currency in the world of American Gods. It's how gods and humans gain power,
Right.
how they make deals and just kind of navigate this whole complex spiritual landscape.
I've always been so fascinated by the idea of sacrifice in mythology, But what strikes me about American Gods is how Gaiman, he kind of flips the script. It's not just gods demanding sacrifice, Everyone's caught in this web of giving things up.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that plays out in Shadow's journey and what the paper says about maybe like the exploitative side of this?
Yeah, for sure. The paper focuses on Shadow's journey as a prime example of sacrifice,
Yeah.
Like, think about it. He loses his freedom, his wife, his old life. He endures physical and emotional suffering, all in service to Mr. Wednesday's plan.
Yeah, I remember like the whole time I was reading it, I kept asking myself, like, what is Shadow getting out of all of this?
Yeah.
So it seems like he's constantly being asked to give things up.
Yeah.
Is there like a point to all this suffering?
Well, the paper suggests that, yes, there is a purpose. Shadow sacrifices aren't just about loss. They're about transformation.
Okay.
The paper analyzes this one scene where he's bound to the world tree. It's like echoing Odin's own sacrifice for wisdom. And it argues that Gaiman's drawing a parallel between their journeys, suggesting that, through sacrifice comes a deeper understanding of oneself and the world.
Okay, so it's not just pointless suffering, but it's like a path to something greater.
Exactly.
That makes sense. And the paper mentioned something about the exploitative side of sacrifice, right?
Right. It points out that Mr. Wednesday, who we later learn is Odin, he kind of manipulates almost everyone around him. And, he uses their willingness to sacrifice to fuel his own power.
That's messed up.
It is. It is.
It makes you question, who really benefits from all this giving, right? Is there any indication of what Gaiman is trying to say about sacrifice in like the modern world?
Yeah, it's almost like he's kind of preying on people's like desires, their need to believe in something bigger than themselves, which honestly I kind of get it. There have been times when I've been so caught up in a cause or a belief that I was willing to give up a lot, you know? Not to the extent of Shadow, of course.
Right.
But still.
And that's what makes American Gods so compelling, I think. It taps into those universal human experiences.
Yeah.
The desire for meaning, for belonging, and then twists them in these like fascinating ways. The paper actually, it draws a parallel between the sacrifices of the old gods and the way we interact with the modern world.
Okay, I'm curious. How do our everyday lives connect to something as epic as gods and sacrifices? Well, the paper argues that just as the old gods need sacrifices to survive, the new gods, the ones that represent technology and media and globalization, they feed off our constant need for information and entertainment and connection.
So like every time I scroll through social media for hours or binge watch a show, I'm essentially like offering a sacrifice to the gods of the internet.
Yeah.
That's kind of a scary thought.
It's a provocative idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
The paper suggests that we're constantly giving up our time, our attention, even our privacy to these new gods. And, in return, they offer us instant gratification, a sense of belonging, a constant stream of stimulation.
But is it really a fair trade? I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself in this digital world, like I'm sacrificing real life experiences for the sake of likes and followers.
That's a really valid point. And the paper seems to suggest that the new gods, while they're powerful in the moment, they're ultimately kind of shallow. They haven't earned their power through real sacrifice, through struggle. They're built on this foundation of fleeting desires and instant gratification.
So they might be like winning right now, but their power isn't as deeply rooted as the old gods.
Exactly, because they haven't truly earned the belief that sustains them. They're more susceptible to change, to being replaced by the next big thing, The old gods, on the other hand, they understand the cyclical nature of life and death, the power of sacrifice, the importance of tradition and history.
So even though they seem like weak and forgotten, they actually have a deeper understanding of how the world works. It's like they're playing the long game while the new gods are all about like short-term gains.
Precisely. And that makes you wonder who will ultimately prevail. Will we continue to sacrifice ourselves at the altar of instant gratification? Or will we rediscover the value of tradition, of history, of connecting with something larger than ourselves?
That's a big question. And honestly, I don't know the answer. But American Gods, it definitely makes me think about the choices we make, both individually and as a society. What are we willing to sacrifice for what we believe in? And are those sacrifices truly worth it in the long run?
And it's not just about grand sacrifices either. The paper points out that in American Gods, sacrifice takes many forms.
Right.
It can be, giving up something tangible, like Shadow giving up his freedom, but it can also be about letting go of something intangible, like a belief, a relationship, or even an aspect of oneself.
Like Shadow letting go of his old life, his grief over Laura, to embrace this new uncertain path.
Exactly, and the paper argues that through these sacrifices, Shadow is transformed. He sheds his old self, his mortal limitations, and becomes something more.
So it's not just about loss, but about growth and change, like a caterpillar sacrificing its old form to become a butterfly.
That's a perfect analogy. It's a kind of death and rebirth, both literally and metaphorically. And in American Gods, this theme of transformation through sacrifice, it plays out on both the human and the divine level.
So the old gods need sacrifice to survive, but they also offer a path to transformation for those who are willing to give something up. That's a pretty complex dynamic.
It is, and it's a dynamic that's deeply embedded in human history and mythology.
Okay, so we've talked about the old gods and the new gods and how they both require sacrifices in different ways. But what about the actual nature of those sacrifices? Are we talking like animal sacrifices, human sacrifices? I'm getting a little nervous here.
Well, the novel doesn't shy away from the violence inherent in some forms of sacrifice. Remember, Mr. Wednesday is orchestrating a war between the old and new gods. He's looking for a big sacrifice to regain his power, and that's bound to get messy.
Yeah, I remember that part. It was intense. But the paper also talked about how sacrifice can be more than just like blood and guts. It can be about giving up something precious, something that requires a real like emotional or psychological cost.
Absolutely. Think about Shadow again. He sacrifices his freedom, his identity, even his love for Laura in order to serve Mr. Wednesday and fulfill his destiny.
And in doing so, he's transformed, right?
Yeah.
He becomes something more than just a regular guy. He taps into this ancient power that's been like lying dormant inside him.
Exactly. And that transformation, that journey of self-discovery, it's directly tied to his willingness to sacrifice.
And it's like he's shedding his old self, his mortal limitations in order to embrace something greater. But it definitely wasn't easy for him.
And that brings us back to the central question the book is grappling with. What are we willing to sacrifice for what we believe in? And what does that sacrifice say about us?
Deep stuff. It makes you wonder what sacrifices we're making in our own lives without even realizing it. Like maybe we're sacrificing our free time to climb the career ladder or our personal relationships for the sake of achieving a goal.
Exactly. And those sacrifices might be necessary, even beneficial in some cases, but it's important to be aware of what we're giving up and why. Are we making these choices consciously, or are we being manipulated like the characters in American Gods?
It's a lot to think about, and it's making me realize that the whole concept of sacrifice is a lot more complex than I initially thought.
It's a theme that's woven throughout human history and literature and mythology, and American Gods explores it in a way that's both thought-provoking and unsettling.
It definitely is. This deep dive is really making me question my own beliefs and the sacrifices I'm willing to make.
And that's the power of a great book, isn't it? It challenges our assumptions and makes us see the world in a new light.
I've always been drawn to stories about gods and mythology, but American Gods it hits different. It's like Gaiman is using these ancient figures to hold up a mirror to our modern world.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the paper highlights. How Gaiman takes these familiar archetypes and gives them this modern twist.
Right.
The old gods representing tradition and history. They're struggling to survive in this world that's obsessed with the new. It makes you wonder if we're losing something important in our pursuit of progress.
Totally. It's like we're so focused on the next big thing that we've forgotten the stories, the beliefs, the rituals that have connected us for centuries.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what Gaiman is trying to warn us about?
I think it's definitely a question that the book raises. The paper argues that the decline of the old gods, it reflects a decline in our connection to something larger than ourselves. Like we've become so individualized, so focused on instant gratification that we've lost sight of the collective narratives that once gave our lives meaning.
And maybe those narratives, those shared beliefs are what helped us make sense of the big questions like mortality and sacrifice.
Yeah.
Without them, are we just left feeling lost and adrift?
It's a possibility for sure. The paper talks about how the new gods, they offer a different kind of meaning, one based on consumption and instant gratification.
Right.
But it also suggests that this kind of meaning is ultimately fleeting, superficial.
No, it's like fast food for the soul, right? It fills you up for a moment, but it doesn't provide any real sustenance.
Yeah. And that lack of sustenance can leave us feeling empty, searching for something more, which brings us back to the power of belief. The paper, it emphasizes how how human belief literally fuels the gods in this story. It's what gives them their power, their very existence.
But the book also shows how easily that belief can be manipulated, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
like Mr. Wednesday, he's always playing angles, exploiting people's faith for his own gain.
Exactly. And the paper points out that this is a cautionary tale about the darker side of belief, you know. It can be a powerful force for good, but it can also be used to control and manipulate.
It makes you wonder how much of what we believe is truly our own, and how much is influenced by outside forces. Are we all just pawns in this cosmic game between the gods?
That's a question that the American Gods doesn't necessarily answer, but it definitely makes us think about the nature of belief, you know, about how it shapes our perceptions of the world and influences our choices.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and bring it back to our listener. Why should they care about all this? What does it mean for them in their everyday life?
I think American Gods offers a powerful message about the search for meaning. You know, Shadow's journey with all its twists and turns. It's a metaphor for our own quest for purpose, for identity, for something to believe in.
And the book reminds us that this search isn't always easy. It often involves loss, sacrifice, even pain. But through these experiences, we can transform ourselves, find our place in the world, and maybe even create something that outlives us.
Exactly. And while the book deals with these heavy themes of mortality and sacrifice, it also offers a glimmer of hope. You know,
Yeah.
it suggests that even in a world where gods can die and beliefs can fade, our individual lives still have meaning.
That even though life is finite, our actions, our choices can have a ripple effect that extends beyond our own mortality.
Absolutely, and that's a powerful message, isn't it? It suggests that we have the power to shape our own destinies, to create something meaningful and lasting, even in the face of death.
Okay, so today we've journeyed into the world of American Gods, exploring how Neil Gaiman uses mortality, sacrifice, and the power of belief to weave a story that is both epic and deeply personal.
It's a story that challenges us to think about the choices we make, the things we believe in, and the sacrifices we're willing to make in pursuit of meaning.
If you're looking for a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it, American Gods is definitely worth checking out. And for our listener, we leave you with this: if you had to make a sacrifice for something you truly believed in, what would it be? And what does that say about the nature of your beliefs? Food for thought as you continue your own deep dive into this fascinating world.